They say that if you look at a photograph for too long, you start to see the lies hidden in the margins. I'm staring at our wedding photo right now, the one on the mahogany mantel in the foyer. Marcus is beaming, his hand pressed firmly against the small of my back, and I look like a woman who has never known a single day of doubt. We were the power couple of the Heights, Elena and Marcus, the landscape designer and the architect. We didn't just build houses, we built lifestyles. But today, the glass over that photo feels cold, almost brittle, like it's waiting for a reason to shatter. Our life together is a series of perfectly curated textures. The scent of expensive espresso beans grinding at 6 a.m., the crisp snap of Marcus's starch-white dress shirts as he shakes them out, the heavy, reassuring weight of our $1.2 million home renovation wrapping around us like a fortress. We were in the middle of the gala countdown. 10 years of marriage, 300 guests invited, and a legacy that looked impenetrable from the outside. I remember Marcus leaning over the kitchen island this morning, his thumb tracing the rim of his mug. He looked at me with that effortless, architectural precision in his eyes and said, "Elena, the lighting for the anniversary gala needs to be softer in the North Garden. We want people to feel like they've stepped into a dream, not a showroom." I laughed, adjusted his silk tie, and told him he was a perfectionist. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Only because you deserve a perfect world, Elle." Then there's Chloe, my baby sister. She's been living in our guest house for 6 months now, ever since her life in Chicago went up in flames. A bad breakup, a lost job, the usual Chloe chaos. I've always been the one to catch her. I told her, "Chloe, stay as long as you need. We're sisters. We're an unbreakable unit." She's the wild child to my steady hand, the person who reminds me that life isn't all blueprints and schedules. She'd come up to the main house in her oversized hoodies, smelling of vanilla and clove, and we'd drink wine until the stars came out. I thought I was saving her. I thought we were closer than ever. The first glitch in the Matrix happened at 7:15 a.m. Marcus was in the shower. I could hear the rhythmic spray of the water against the slate tile, a sound that usually felt like part of the house's heartbeat. His official phone, the sleek latest model iPhone, was sitting right there on the nightstand, plugged into its charging dock. It was silent. No notifications, no pings. But then I heard it, a muffled, low-frequency vibration. It wasn't coming from the nightstand. It wasn't coming from the bed. It was coming from the depths of the walk-in closet. I walked toward the sound, my bare feet sinking into the plush wool carpet. The vibration was persistent, a frantic buzzing that felt out of place in our quiet morning. I followed it past his rows of Italian suits, past the shelves of leather loafers, down to the very back where his heavy winter boots were tucked away in their original boxes. I reached for the left Timberland, the one he hadn't worn since our trip to Aspen 2 years ago. My fingers brushed against something cold and plastic. I pulled it out. It was a burner phone, a cheap plastic relic with a cracked screen and a sticky keypad. It looked like trash compared to everything else we owned. My heart didn't race immediately. It just sort of went numb, a dull thud in my chest that made my hands feel heavy. I pressed the center button. The screen illuminated with a harsh, blue light that felt like a slap. There was one missed call and one unread message from a contact saved only as the sun. I opened the message. The text read, "He's suspicious. Meet me at the usual spot in 20. Don't be late." The words didn't make sense. He's suspicious? Who was he? Marcus was the one with the phone. Was I the he? No, that was impossible. My mind scrambled for a logical explanation. Maybe it was a client with a privacy obsession. Maybe it was a surprise for the anniversary. I looked at the timestamp. 7:12 a.m. 3 minutes ago. The shower stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. I shoved the burner phone back into the boot, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. I scrambled out of the closet just as the bathroom door creaked open, sending a cloud of steam into the bedroom. Marcus stepped out, a towel wrapped around his waist, his skin still glistening. He looked at me, his expression unreadable for a split second before he broke into that familiar, charming smile. "Everything okay, Elle? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. He walked over to the nightstand and picked up his official phone, checking it with practiced ease. I forced my voice to stay level, though it felt thin, like a thread about to snap. I told him, "Just a headache, Marcus. I think I've been staring at the garden layouts for too long. I thought I heard something in the closet." He didn't skip a beat. He didn't even glance toward the closet. He just walked over, put his hands on my shoulders, and looked deep into my eyes. "It's just the house settling, honey. Old wood, new pipes. You're stressed about the gala. Why don't you take the morning off? Go see Chloe, have some girl time. Let me handle the vendors today." I nodded, playing the part of the dutiful, overwhelmed wife. But as he turned back to the mirror to shave, I watched his reflection. He was whistling, a low, cheerful tune. I realized then that I didn't know the man in the mirror at all. I stayed there, rooted to the spot, wondering how many other secrets were hidden in the shadows of our perfect home. Later that morning, I walked down the stone path to the guest house. The air was crisp, the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine filling my lungs, but it didn't calm me. I knocked on Chloe's door. She opened it wearing my old college sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked tired, but she smiled when she saw me. "Hey, big sis," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You look stressed. Is Marcus being a taskmaster again?" I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the small living room. It was cluttered with her things, half-finished sketches, coffee mugs, a pile of laundry. I sat on the edge of the sofa and said, "Chloe, have you noticed Marcus acting different lately? Like he's hiding something?" Chloe paused, a piece of toast halfway to her mouth. She didn't look away. She didn't blink. She just sighed and sat down across from me. "Elena, he's planning a massive anniversary party for you. Of course he's hiding things. He probably has 5 different surprises lined up. Don't ruin it by being a detective. You always do this. You get so caught up in the details that you miss the big picture." She reached out and squeezed my hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. "Just breathe, okay? He loves you. I love you. Everything is fine." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to tell her about the phone in the boot, about the sun, about the message that didn't sound like a surprise party at all. But a voice in the back of my head told me to wait. If Marcus was hiding a second life, I couldn't just throw accusations around. I needed to see the whole blueprint before I could tear the building down. As I left the guest house, I looked back at the main house, our masterpiece. From here, the floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the sky, making the whole structure look transparent, like it had nothing to hide. But I knew better now. There was a cheap plastic phone vibrating in the dark, and a contact named after the stars was waiting for my husband in 20 minutes. I checked my watch. 8:45 a.m. Marcus had said he was going to the office. I walked to my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. I wasn't going to my studio today. I was going to find out where the usual spot was, and I was going to pray that I was wrong. Because if I was right, the life I had spent 10 years building wasn't just a facade. It was a cage. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, the engine idling. I pulled out my own phone and looked at our last few text exchanges. "Marcus, yesterday at 4:12 p.m., picked up the vintage champagne you liked. Only the best for my girl. Me, you're spoiled. See you at 7? Marcus," counting down the minutes. It was all so normal. So sickeningly, perfectly normal. I scrolled back further, months and months of I love you. And don't forget the dry cleaning. And you're my world. How much of it was real? Was any of it? I felt a sudden, sharp pang of nausea. I thought about the burner phone again. He's suspicious. The word he kept looping in my mind. If the message was for Marcus, and it was about, he, then who was the third person in this shadow play? I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. I saw Marcus's SUV pull out a few seconds later. He didn't turn toward the downtown office. He turned left, heading toward the outskirts of the city, toward the old botanical gardens. The investigation had begun, and as I followed him from a 3-car distance, I realized that the hardest part wasn't going to be finding the truth. The hardest part was going to be pretending I didn't already know that my world was about to end. I watched his taillights disappear around a bend, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The steering wheel felt like a ring of ice beneath my palms as I trailed Marcus's SUV. I kept 3 cars between us, my eyes fixed on the familiar silver tailgate of his Lexus, a vehicle I'd helped him pick out because it looked dependable. Dependable. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. He didn't turn toward the glass and steel canyons of the financial district where his architectural firm sat. Instead, he cruised toward the edge of the city, where the skyscrapers give way to the sprawling, neglected greenery of the old botanical gardens. It's a place for tourists and retirees, not for high-powered executives at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. My hands were shaking so violently that I had to grip the wheel until my knuckles turned a ghostly white. I watched him pull into the gravel overflow lot, far from the main entrance. I parked 100 yards away, tucked behind a screen of overgrown weeping willows. My breath hitched as I saw him step out of the car. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. He looked casual, relaxed as he leaned against the door and checked the burner phone, the one he'd pulled from his boot. He looked at his watch, then back at the phone, his face set in a mask of focused anticipation. It was a look I'd seen 1,000 times when he was waiting for a client, but here, in the shadows of the willow trees, it looked predatory. I couldn't just sit there. I needed a witness. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't spiraling into a clinical delusion. I reached for my phone and dialed Sarah. Sarah has been my best friend since we were 20. She's a forensic accountant who sees the world in cold, hard balances and debts. She picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp and caffeinated. She said, "Elena, I thought you were at the nursery picking out Japanese maples. Why do you sound like you're breathing through a straw?" I told her everything in a frantic, hushed whisper. The phone in the boot, the message from the son, the fact that I was currently staring at my husband in a deserted parking lot. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could almost hear Sarah's analytical mind clicking into gear. She finally said, "Elena, listen to me. Do not get out of that car. Do not confront him. If Marcus is using a burner, this isn't just a casual fling. People use burners for things they need to bury deep. It could be gambling, it could be a second family, or it could be something financial. He's an architect, L. He handles millions in vendor contracts. Maybe he's skimming, or maybe he's just a bastard. Either way, we need a paper trail. I'm sending you a link. Download it now. It's a background tracking app. If you can get it on his primary phone for just 60 seconds, I can mirror his GPS and his cloud backups." I downloaded the app, the progress bar crawling forward like a taunt. While I waited, I looked back at Marcus. A dark-colored sedan pulled up next to him. A figure in a heavy, gray hooded sweatshirt stepped out. They were obscured by the car's pillar, but I saw Marcus straighten up. He didn't hug them. He didn't kiss them. He handed them a small, white envelope. The figure took it, nodded, and got back into the car. The whole exchange took less than 30 seconds. The sedan peeled away, kicking up gravel. And Marcus stood there for a moment, watching it go, before he climbed back into his Lexus and headed toward the city. I didn't follow him this time. I sat there until the dust settled, my mind a storm of what-ifs. Was that the person? Was that the son? It didn't feel like a romantic tryst. It felt like a transaction. I met Sarah an hour later at a crowded, noisy cafe downtown. I needed the noise. I needed the anonymity of strangers clinking spoons and shouting latte orders. Sarah was already there, her laptop open, a sea of spreadsheets glowing on her screen. She looked up at me, her eyes full of a pity that made me want to scream. She pushed a double espresso toward me and said, I started digging into the firm's public filings while I waited. There's nothing glaringly obvious, but Marcus has been opening a lot of consultancy sub-accounts lately. It's all legal on the surface, but it's messy. Now, give me your phone. Did you get the tracker on his main device? I shook my head, my voice cracking. I told her, he hasn't let it out of his sight since this morning. He carries it like a shield. But Sarah, I found something else. Before I left, I went into the guest house. Chloe was out, and I looked around. I found a receipt, a high-end charger for a burner phone, and a silk scarf. It was Hermes, emerald green. I've never seen her wear it. Marcus bought me that same scarf in blue last Christmas. Sarah's expression hardened. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous frequency. She said, Elena, I'm going to say something you aren't going to like. Chloe has always been a sponge. She takes your clothes, she takes your money, and she takes your time. Is it possible she's taking more? If Marcus is the one providing for her, and they're using burners to communicate while she's living 50 feet from your bedroom, that's not just an affair. That's a conspiracy. No, I whispered, the word feeling like a lie even as I said it. She's my sister. She wouldn't. She knows what I went through with my ex. She knows Marcus is everything to me. Then explain the charger, Sarah countered. Explain why the son messaged him saying, he's suspicious right as you were in the house. Wait, he's suspicious? If Marcus is the one with the phone, who is the he? The realization hit me like a physical blow. I leaned back, the air leaving my lungs. I said, the message wasn't for Marcus. The message was from the person holding the burner, telling the other person that someone, likely me or maybe a business partner, was catching on. But wait, if Marcus had the phone in his boot, then he was the one receiving the message. So the son was warning him. He's suspicious. Maybe they thought I was a man, or maybe they were talking about someone else entirely. Sarah tapped her pen against the table, a rhythmic, annoying sound. She said, or maybe it's a code. Maybe he is a nickname for you to throw anyone off who accidentally sees the screen. We need that tracker, Elena. We need to see where he goes when he says he's at the gym. We need to see who he's emailing from his private server. I went home that afternoon feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. The house was quiet. Chloe was supposedly at a yoga retreat for the weekend. Or so she told me in a bubbly text an hour ago. Namaste, sis. Going off-grid to find my center. See you Sunday. Love you. I looked at the guest house. The lights were off. I spent the next 4 hours in my home office, pretending to work on the nursery designs for the Reynolds estate. But my eyes kept drifting to the security camera feed on my second monitor. We have cameras at the front gate and the porch, but Marcus had insisted we keep the interior private. A man's home is his sanctuary. He'd said, we don't need to live in an aquarium. Now, that sanctuary felt like a tomb. I decided to do something I'd never done in 10 years of marriage. I went into Marcus's private study. It was a room I usually avoided, all dark wood, heavy books, and the smell of expensive tobacco. I began to sift through his desk. It was meticulously organized. Folders for Project Alpha, Project Omega, anniversary planning. I opened the anniversary folder. Inside were catering menus, floral quotes, and a seating chart. But tucked into the very back was a document that made my blood run cold. It was a draft for a legal filing. My name was at the top. Petition for involuntary civil commitment and temporary guardianship. I read the words over and over, but they wouldn't compute. Subject exhibits signs of extreme paranoia, auditory hallucinations, and emotional instability. There were dates listed, dates when I'd been tired or when we'd had a small argument. He'd been documenting my decline for months. I heard the garage door moan open. Marcus was home. I shoved the folder back into the drawer and scrambled out of the study, my heart hammering against my ribs. I made it to the kitchen just as he walked in, looking tan and energized. He dropped his keys on the counter and pulled me into a hug. He smelled like wood smoke and that expensive cologne I'd bought him. "Hey, beautiful," he murmured into my hair. "How was your day? Did you get those maples sorted out?" I leaned into him, my skin crawling. I said, "I did. They're going to be perfect." "How was the office?" He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. He looked concerned, that practiced, architectural concern. He said, "Actually, I had to step out for a bit. Had a meeting with a new vendor out near the old gardens. It was a bit of a trek, but I think it'll be worth it for the gala. You look pale, Elena. Did you take your vitamins today? You know you get flighty when your iron is low." "I'm fine, Marcus," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just a long day. I think I'll go for a walk. Clear my head." "Good idea," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his primary phone. He set it on the counter, screen up. "I'm going to hop in the shower. Oh, and Chloe called. She's having a great time at the retreat. She says she feels like a new person." I waited until I heard the water start upstairs. This was it. 60 seconds. I grabbed his phone. My hands were slick with sweat. I opened the browser and typed in the URL Sarah had given me. My eyes kept darting to the kitchen clock. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. The app began to install. The progress bar flickered at 70%. Come on. 90%. Suddenly, the screen changed. An incoming call. No caller ID. Just a string of zeros. The phone began to vibrate in my hand, the same low-frequency hum as the burner in the boot. I didn't answer it. I watched the tracker finish its installation and hide itself. I wiped the browser history with trembling fingers and set the phone back exactly where it had been, a fraction of an inch from the edge of the granite. I walked out onto the back patio, the cool evening air hitting my face. I looked over at the guest house. A single light was on in the upstairs window. Chloe was supposed to be at a retreat. She was supposed to be off-grid. I pulled out my own phone and sent a text to Sarah. "The tracker is live." "And Sarah? The light is on in the guest house. She's here." "Within minutes," Sarah replied. "I'm seeing his GPS data from today." "Elena, he wasn't just at the botanical gardens. Before he came home, he stopped at a bank, a private wealth management firm. And then he went to a cell phone tower near the outskirts. He's moving money, Elle. A lot of it. And he's not moving it into your joint account." I stood there in the dark, watching the light in the guest house flicker. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a massive, dark lake, and the ice was finally starting to crack under my feet. Marcus wasn't just having an affair. He was building a case against me. He was preparing to erase me from my own life, and my own sister was the one holding the eraser. I looked up at our bedroom window. I could see Marcus's silhouette through the frosted glass of the shower. He looked so tall, so strong, so perfect, and I realized that the man I loved was a ghost, and the man I was living with was a predator. I whispered to the empty garden, "I see you now, Marcus. I see both of you." I walked toward the guest house. my footsteps silent on the grass. I didn't knock. I just stood outside the window, listening. For a long time, there was nothing but the sound of the wind in the trees. Then, I heard a voice. It was Chloe. She wasn't chanting OM or meditating. She was laughing. "I know," she said, her voice muffled but unmistakable. "She actually asked me if you were acting weird. I told her she was just being paranoid. She's so easy, Marcus. It's almost sad." There was a pause, and then she spoke again. "Don't worry. The phone is safe. Just keep playing the worried husband. By the time the gala rolls around, she'll be so far gone that no one will question the papers. I love you too. See you at the usual spot tomorrow." I backed away into the shadows, the world spinning. The usual spot. The botanical gardens. The white envelope. The "he's suspicious" message. It wasn't a warning about a person. It was a warning about the plan. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. They wanted to turn me into a ghost. Fine. But they forgot one thing about ghosts. They're the ones who know where all the bodies are buried. I walked back to the main house, stepped into the kitchen, and picked up a glass of water. When Marcus came downstairs, wrapped in his robe and looking refreshed, I smiled at him. "You were right, Marcus," I said, my voice as smooth as glass. "I do feel a bit better. I think I'll start finalizing the guest list for the gala tomorrow. We want everything to be unforgettable." He smiled back, that warm, predatory smile, and squeezed my hand. "That's my girl," he said. But as he turned away, I saw the burner phone peeking out from the pocket of his robe, and I knew that tomorrow the hunt would begin in earnest. The silence in our house has changed. It used to be the silence of luxury, of thick walls and high-end insulation. But now it feels like the silence of a tomb that hasn't been sealed correctly. Every creak of the floorboards sounds like a confession. Every time Marcus enters a room, the air pressure seems to drop, leaving me lightheaded and gasping for a breath that won't come. We were sitting at the breakfast nook, the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the steam rising from our mugs. It looked like a photograph from an architectural digest, but beneath the surface, the foundations were rotting. I watched him across the marble island. He was scrolling through his primary phone, his face a mask of calm professionalism. I decided to push, just a fraction. I stirred my coffee, the silver spoon clinking rhythmically against the porcelain, and I said, "You know, Marcus, it's the strangest thing. I went for a drive yesterday morning, just to clear my head like you suggested, and I could have sworn I saw your Lexus parked near the old botanical gardens, right by the weeping willows in the overflow lot. But that's miles away from your firm, isn't it?" He didn't look up. He didn't even flinch. He just swiped his thumb across the screen and took a slow, deliberate sip of his coffee. He set the mug down and finally met my eyes, and for a second, I saw it, a flicker of something sharp and cold behind his pupils. Then it was gone, replaced by that patronizing, gentle concern that had become his favorite weapon. He sighed and said, "Elena, we talked about this. Your mind is playing tricks on you again. I was in a board meeting from 8 until noon. I have the minutes on my laptop if you're really feeling this. Precarious. Are you sure you haven't been skipping your sleep aids? You know how you get when the insomnia kicks in. You start projecting." The word projecting felt like a slap. I forced a smile and said, "Maybe you're right. It just looked so much like your car. And there was someone in a gray hoodie. I thought it might have been a client." Marcus stood up, leaning over the island until he was inches from my face. I could smell the peppermint of his toothpaste and the expensive musk of his aftershave. He said, "Elena, look at me. You're spiraling. First it's ghost noises in the closet. Now you're seeing me in parks across town. I'm worried about you. Truly. Maybe we should call Dr. Eris. Just for a check-in. We have the gala coming up. and I can't have you having a breakdown in front of 300 people. It wouldn't be good for the brand or for your health." He walked away before I could respond, his footsteps heavy and confident. He wasn't just lying. He was rewriting the reality of my own eyes. That's when the text battle began. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from him, sent from the next room. The message read, "I've scheduled a massage for you at 2 p.m. Please go. You're becoming difficult to be around, and I don't want to say things I'll regret. Let's try to have a normal evening, okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the tracking app Sarah had installed. The red dot representing Marcus was stationary in his study, but another notification popped up. He had accessed a shared cloud folder titled Family Archives. I watched in real time as he began deleting photos, specifically photos of me from the last 3 years where I looked happy, healthy, and vibrant. He was pruning the digital evidence of my sanity, leaving only the moments where I looked tired or stressed. The afternoon was a blurred nightmare of psychological warfare. I didn't go to the massage. I stayed in my office, watching the guest house through the blinds. Chloe emerged around noon, wearing that same emerald green silk scarf I'd seen in the receipt. She caught me looking. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just adjusted the scarf and started her car, her eyes fixed forward with a cold, glassy intensity. 10 minutes later, a text came in from her. "Hey Al, Marcus told me you're having a rough day. I'm so sorry you're feeling paranoid again. Remember what happened in Chicago. You don't want to go back to that place. Just take your meds and rest. I'm here if you need to talk, but maybe give Marcus some space. He's doing so much for you." I felt the heat rise in my throat. I typed back, "What happened in Chicago, Chloe? You mean when I paid off your debts so you wouldn't get evicted? And why are you wearing a green Hermes scarf? I don't remember you buying that." The bubbles appeared immediately. She was typing fast. "I don't know what you're talking about. It's a knockoff I got at a thrift store. See, this is what I mean. You're obsessing over tiny things. It's scary, Elena. Truly. Marcus is just trying to protect you. Don't push him away." I put the phone down, my breath coming in shallow gasps. They were tag-teaming me, a coordinated assault on my perception of the world. Every move I made was being reframed as a symptom of a mental collapse. I looked at the calendar on my desk. The gala was only 5 days away. 5 days until Marcus would likely use that legal petition I found in his desk. Dinner that night was a masterclass in tension. Marcus had ordered in from our favorite French bistro, but the coq au vin tasted like ash. He spent the entire meal talking about the seating chart, pointedly mentioning how he'd placed my friends near the exits in case I felt overwhelmed. I looked at him and said, "I'm not going to feel overwhelmed, Marcus. I'm going to be the life of the party. Why would you think otherwise?" He put his fork down with a slow, deliberate clink. He looked at me with a pity that felt like a jagged blade. He said, "Elena, you've been talking to yourself in the garden. I saw you on the porch camera. You were whispering at the trees. You don't even realize you're doing it, do you?" My heart stopped. I hadn't been whispering at trees. I'd been checking the perimeter for his hidden cameras. I said, "I was checking the irrigation lines, Marcus. You know the north garden has been dry." He just shook his head, a small, sad smile on his lips. "If that's the story you need to tell yourself, Elle. But I've started a log. For the doctor. It's for your own good. I can't let you hurt yourself or our reputation." The escalation didn't stop at dinner. At 11 p.m., as I was trying to feign sleep, I heard the burner phone vibrate from the closet again. Marcus thought I was out cold. I watched through narrowed eyes as he crept toward the back of the closet. He didn't even try to hide it this time. He was so confident in my decline that he thought I was too broken to notice. He whispered into the phone, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that I barely recognized. She's reacting perfectly. The garden's comment was a nice touch, but the talking to trees bit really rattled her. Yeah, no, she hasn't found the documents yet. If she does, she'll just think she's hallucinating anyway. I've already planted the seeds with her mother. See you at the spot tomorrow. I have the final papers. He hung up and turned back toward the bed. I stayed perfectly still, slowing my breathing, acting the part of the medicated, docile wife. But inside I was a furnace. Every word he spoke was a coal tossed onto the fire of my resolve. When he finally fell asleep, his breathing heavy and rhythmic, I reached for my phone under the pillow. Sarah had sent an urgent update. The message read, Elena, I tracked the burner's pings. It's not just Chloe. There's a third device frequently in the mix. An unlisted number registered to a shell company called Sundance Holdings. And I followed the money. Marcus didn't just move your inheritance. He's been taking out loans against the house. Your house. The one your father left you. He's leveraged everything. If he gets guardianship, he can sell it all before you even know what happened. You need to get that burner phone. Whatever is on there is the only thing that will stop a judge from believing his crazy wife narrative. I looked at Marcus's sleeping form. He looked so peaceful, so handsome in the moonlight. It was hard to reconcile this man with the one who was systematically stripping my life away. I realized then that the sun wasn't just a nickname for a person. It was a nickname for the light they were going to use to burn me out of existence. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the guest house. The light was off now, but I knew Chloe was in there, probably dreaming of the day she'd move into the main bedroom. I thought about the text battles, the gaslighting, the fake concern. They wanted a war. They had no idea who they were fighting. I had spent my career designing landscapes, learning how to move earth, how to redirect water, how to make the environment serve my vision. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass and whispered, "The house isn't settling, Marcus. It's preparing to fall." I took a deep breath, the scent of the garden, roses drifting in through the cracked window. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just follow him. Tomorrow, I was going to find the point of no return. I was going to find the dark secret that held their whole twisted world together. And then I was going to make sure they never saw the sun again. The clock on the nightstand ticked like a countdown, each rhythmic thud echoing in the hollow of my chest. It was 3:14 a.m. Beside me, Marcus was a statue of tranquility, his breath deep, and even the sound of a man who slept with a perfectly clear conscience. But I was wide awake, the adrenaline a bitter metallic tang in the back of my throat. I watched the moonlight filter through the heavy velvet curtains, casting long, skeletal shadows across our Egyptian cotton sheets. This was the moment, the point of no return. I slid out of bed, my movement so slow it felt like I was moving through honey. I didn't let the floorboards groan. I knew exactly where to place my weight. A map of every imperfection in this house burned into my mind. I reached the closet, the air inside smelling of cedar and Marcus's expensive wool suits. My hands didn't tremble this time. They were cold, steady, and purposeful. I reached into the back of the closet, felt the rough leather of the Timberland boot, and pulled out the plastic burner. The weight of it felt immense, a small black brick of betrayal. I didn't turn it on there. I retreated to the master bathroom, locking the door with a silent click that sounded like a gunshot in my head. I sat on the edge of the marble tub, the stone chilling my skin through my silk nightgown, and pressed the power button. The harsh blue light flooded the small space, making me squint. I tried the passcode. Our wedding date, 0612. The screen flickered and unlocked. It was that simple. He was so convinced of my fragility that he hadn't even bothered with a complex password. To him, I was already a ghost, and ghosts don't read text messages. I bypassed the call logs and went straight to the messages. There were hundreds. I scrolled past the logistical ones, the meetups at the garden, the mentions of the envelope. I looked for the marrow of the thing. I found a thread from 3 weeks ago. The Sun wrote, "She's asking about the bank statements again. We need to move the Sundance funds to the Cayman offshore before the audit on the 15th. Marcus replied, "I've got it handled. I'm rerouting the landscaping budget for the Reynolds project through the shell. By the time she realizes the money is gone, she'll be under observation. The papers for the commitment are drafted. I just need one more episode recorded on the porch cam." The Sun, "God, you're brilliant. I can't wait to have that house to ourselves. I'm tired of playing the supportive little sister. It's exhausting watching her act like she's the anchor of this family." The room seemed to tilt. My own sister, my wild child who I pampered and protected, talking about me like I was an obstacle to be cleared away. But it got worse. I opened a folder labeled Evidence. It wasn't evidence of my insanity. It was a collection of photos and recordings they had staged. There was a video of me from 2 months ago, sleeping on the sofa after a long day. The audio had been digitally altered. In the original memory, I was just sleeping. In this version, there was a distorted overlay of me muttering incoherent, frightening things about the voices in the walls. They were manufacturing a psychosis. I felt a surge of cold fury that surpassed fear. I opened the last message in the thread, sent only an hour before Marcus came to bed. The Sun, "I have the final appraisal for the estate. If we sell the land to the developers by next month, we clear $4 million after the debts are settled. Is she still suspicious about the second phone?" Marcus, "She found it in the boot. I convinced her she was hallucinating. She actually believed me. She looked so pathetic, Chloe, like a wounded bird. We're in the home stretch. See you at the gala. Make sure you wear that green scarf. It drives her crazy." I stared at the screen until the light burned into my retinas. They weren't just having an affair. This wasn't a story of a husband falling for a sister. This was a corporate takeover of a human life. They were liquidated my father's legacy, my home, and my sanity piece by piece, and laughing while they did it. I looked at the reflection of myself in the vanity mirror. I looked pale, yes. My eyes were rimmed with red from lack of sleep, but I didn't see a wounded bird. I saw a woman who had spent 10 years designing landscapes, knowing exactly how to manipulate the earth to hide the ugly parts. I knew how to plant something and wait for it to bloom. I took my own phone and began photographing every screen of the burner. Click. The bank transfers. Click. The plan for the commitment. Click. The photo of them in my guest house, draped over each other on the sofa I bought for her. I sent the images to Sarah in a single, encrypted burst. Then I saw a file at the very bottom of the burner's gallery, a voice memo labeled "The Final Piece." I pressed play, keeping the volume at a whisper. Chloe's voice came through, sharp and clear. "But Marcus, what if the doctor sees through it? What if she doesn't react the way we want at the gala?" Marcus's voice, lower, more sinister than I had ever heard it. "She will. I've been microdosing her evening tea with the scopolamine, just enough to keep her confused, to make her memory Swiss cheese. By the time we stand on that stage for the anniversary toast, she won't even know what year it is. She'll look like a raving lunatic in front of the city's elite. The judge is already on my payroll for the architectural consultancy. It's a closed loop, Chloe. We're golden." I dropped the phone. It clattered against the marble, the sound echoing like a crack in the world. Scopolamine, the devil's breath. That was why I was so tired, why my head felt like it was filled with cotton every morning. He wasn't just gaslighting me. He was poisoning me. He was reaching into my brain and turning off the lights. I leaned over the sink and threw up a violent, bitter purge of everything I'd swallowed. The tea, the lies, the decade of trust. I rinsed my mouth, the water freezing cold, and looked at the burner phone lying on the floor. He thought I was a wounded bird. He thought I was a ghost. I picked up the burner, wiped it clean of my fingerprints with a hand towel, and walked back into the bedroom. I didn't put it back in the boot. I placed it on the floor, just barely peeking out from under the edge of the dresser, close enough to be hidden, but positioned so that if he looked for it, he'd find it and think he'd simply been careless. I wanted him to feel the first prickle of true anxiety. I wanted him to think he was losing his grip. I got back in a bed, my body stiff and cold. Marcus didn't move. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I wasn't Elena the victim anymore. I was Elena, the architect of their destruction. As the first gray light of dawn began to bleed through the curtains, Marcus stirred. He reached out, his hand grazing my arm, and he whispered, "Morning, Elle. You sleep okay? You were tossing and turning." I turned to him and smiled. It was the best performance of my life. I said, "I slept like the dead, Marcus. I feel clearer than I have in months. I think that tea you've been making me is really starting to work." He beamed at me, that bright, predatory smile. "I told you, honey, I always know what's best for you." I watched him get up and head for the closet. I waited. I heard him pause. I heard the sharp intake of breath. He'd seen the phone under the dresser. He'd realized he'd been careless. I could practically hear his heart start to race. I sat up, stretching my arms over my head. I said, "You okay in there, Marcus? You look a little rattled." He came out of the closet, his hand shoved deep into his robe pocket. His face was pale, a fine sheen of sweat already forming on his brow. He said, "Fine, Elle. Just a long day ahead. The gala is only 48 hours away. Lots to do." "Lots to do?" I repeated, my voice as sweet as poison honey. "I think I'll go check on Chloe. See if she needs anything for her big night. She's been such a help through all this." I walked past him, my shoulder brushing his. I didn't look back. I headed straight for the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, making sure to dump the remainder of the tea leaves into the disposal and grinding them into nothing. Sarah's reply came through on my phone. "I have it all, Elena. The bank fraud, the medical tampering. This is enough to bury them both for 20 years. What's the move?" I typed back, "We wait for the gala. I want everyone to see. I want them to have their moment in the sun before I eclipse it forever." I looked out the window at the guest house. Chloe was standing by her window, looking toward the main house, her face unreadable. I raised my glass of water to her in a silent toast. They thought they were the ones watching me. They thought they were the ones in control. But as I watched Marcus's Lexus pull out of the driveway, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, I knew the truth. The dark secret wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the poison. The dark secret was that I was still here, and I was finally dangerously awake. The air inside the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of 5,000 white lilies and the cloying, expensive musk of 300 people who believed they were witnessing a fairy tale. I stood in the center of it all, my reflection caught in the endless gilded mirrors. I wore a gown the color of a fresh wound, a deep, defiant crimson that stood out against the sea of safe blacks and muted creams. Every bead on the dress felt like a drop of lead, heavy and cold. My mother walked up to me, smoothing the lace on my shoulder with a hand that trembled slightly. She leaned in and whispered, "Elena, you look vibrant. But Marcus said you've been having those spells again. Are you sure you're up for this? You look like you're miles away." I turned to her, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face open. I told her, "I've never been more present, Mom. Marcus worries too much. He wants everyone to think I'm fragile so he can play the hero, but I'm the one who designed this garden. I know exactly where the roots go. She looked at me, confused, her brow furrowing. But then Marcus was there, sliding his arm around my waist like a coil. He squeezed my hip, a warning disguised as a caress. "She's just excited. Margaret," Marcus said, his voice a smooth, effortless baritone that filled the space between us. "But we should keep her moving. We don't want her getting overstimulated. Come on, Elle. The board members are waiting for the big announcement." He led me away, his grip tightening. As we moved through the crowd, I felt the burner phone. The one I had stolen back from his hiding spot earlier that afternoon, taped to the inside of my thigh. It was a cold, hard lump against my skin, a secret weight that balanced the lies in my head. I looked over at the bar and saw Chloe. She was wearing a dress that was almost a replica of mine, but in a pale, innocent gold. Around her neck was the emerald Hermes scarf, tied in a jaunty, mocking knot. She caught my eye and raised a champagne flute, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked like a predator, waiting for the kill signal. The evening was a blur of high-stakes theater. I watched Marcus play the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on a decade of perfect partnership. Every few minutes, he'd lean into me and whisper things like, "Remember to breathe, Elena," or "If you feel the voices starting, just squeeze my hand." He was performing for the witnesses, building the narrative of my collapse in real time. I played along. I let my hand shake when I held my glass. I drifted off in the middle of conversations, staring at the ceiling until people looked away in discomfort. I was giving him exactly what he wanted, a front row seat to my supposed destruction. At 9 p.m., the lights dimmed. The string quartet faded into a low, atmospheric hum. Marcus led me toward the stage, his hand firm on my elbow. The large projector screen behind the podium flickered to life, currently displaying a frozen image of us on our wedding day. Marcus stepped up to the microphone, the feedback whining for a brief, sharp second. "Friends, family, colleagues," he began, his voice dripping with practiced emotion. 10 years ago, I stood at an altar and promised to protect this woman. Lately, that promise has taken on a deeper meaning. As many of you know, Elena has been struggling. It hasn't been easy, and tonight is as much a celebration of her resilience as it is our marriage. Before we toast to the next decade, I wanted to share a little journey through our life, a reminder of the light we're trying to find again. He signaled to the technician. Sarah, disguised in a headset and a black blazer, sitting in the shadows of the tech booth. Marcus thought he was about to play a heartbreaking montage of my descent. He thought he was about to show clips of me talking to trees and wandering the halls. The first slide appeared. It wasn't our wedding. It was a high-resolution scan of the Sundance Holdings bank transfers. $4 million moving from my father's trust into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. A murmur rippled through the room, a low, confused sound like the rustling of dry leaves. Marcus stiffened, his hand flying to the laptop on the podium. "There seems to be a technical glitch," he stammered, his voice losing its polished edge. "One moment." The screen changed. It was a screenshot of a text message. "The Sun. Is she still suspicious about the second phone?" "Marcus." She found it. I convinced her she was hallucinating. She actually believed me. She looked so pathetic, Chloe. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a building collapses. I stepped away from Marcus, moving to the edge of the stage where the light hit the crimson of my dress. I looked at the front row, at our parents, at the judge Marcus had claimed was in his pocket. I saw the horror dawning on their faces. "The glitch isn't in the system, Marcus," I said, My voice projected through the lapel mic Sarah had hidden in my corsage. The glitch is in the plan. The next slide was the voice memo. Marcus's voice filled the ballroom, amplified by $20,000 worth of audio equipment. I'd been microdosing her evening tea with scopolamine. By the time we stand on that stage, she won't even know what year it is. She'll look like a raving lunatic. I turned to look at Marcus. He was white as a sheet, his mouth hanging open, his eyes darting toward the exits. But Sarah had already signaled the security team. Real off-duty officers I'd hired, not the firm's usual event staff. They stepped into the light at the back of the hall. Chloe tried to bolt. She dropped her champagne glass, the crystal shattering with a sharp, final sound against the marble. She made it 5 feet before 2 guards intercepted her. She started screaming. It wasn't me. It was his idea. He told me she was already crazy. He said we deserved the money. Her voice was shrill, stripping away the wild child persona until there was nothing left but a desperate, selfish girl in a gold dress. I walked back toward Marcus. He tried to reach for me, his face twisting into a mask of frantic, ugly pleading. Elena, listen to me. That's all AI. It's a deep fake. You're having an episode. Honey, remember? You're not well. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a sudden, profound sense of boredom. The monster wasn't even creative. He was just a thief in a nice suit. I pulled the burner phone from my thigh and held it up for the room to see. I found your son, Marcus, but it turns out the sun is the one thing that reveals everything in the shadows. I looked at the judge in the front row and said, Your Honor, I believe you'll find the full dossiers on your phone by tomorrow morning. The real ones, including the bank records Marcus tried to hide from the audit. And as for the commitment papers, I reached into my cleavage and pulled out the folded, crumpled draft I'd stolen from his desk. I tore it in half, the sound of the paper ripping amplified by the mic. I let the pieces flutter down like snow onto his expensive leather shoes. The room erupted. My mother was sobbing. Marcus's business partners were shouting for explanations. And in the back, the flashbulbs of the local society photographers began to go off like a barrage of lightning. The power couple was being dismantled in high definition. Marcus fell to his knees. It wasn't a gesture of repentance. It was the collapse of a man who realized his currency no longer had any value. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a pathetic, shimmering hatred. You'll have nothing, Elena, he hissed, his voice raw. I've leveraged the house. I've emptied the accounts. You're standing in a ruin. I leaned down, my face inches from his. I could smell the terror on him, now, a sour, sharp scent that replaced the musk. I whispered, so only he could hear, I'm a landscape designer, Marcus. I know how to clear a site before I build something new. You didn't leverage my house. You leveraged the shell company I've been quietly distancing from my primary assets for the last 48 hours. Sarah is very good at her job. You didn't take my money. You took out a $4 million loan in your own name, secured by assets that no longer exist. The look on his face was the most beautiful thing I had ever designed. It was the look of a man who had tried to bury someone and realized he'd spent months digging his own grave. The police stepped onto the stage. They didn't use the gentle, respectful tone Marcus was used to. They grabbed his arms and forced them behind his back. The metal of the handcuffs clicked shut, a cold, final punctuation mark. As they led him and a sobbing Chloe out through the center aisle, past the 300 guests who were filming every second of the fall, I didn't feel triumph. I just felt light. I stood on the stage as the room remained in a state of chaotic shock. I picked up a fresh glass of water from the podium. I looked out at the white lilies, the gilded mirrors, and the people who had watched me being erased for months without saying a word. I raised the glass and said, The party is over. Please see yourselves out. I walked off the stage, my red train sweeping the floor, and headed for the garden. I needed to breathe air that didn't smell like a lie. Behind me, the house of cards was finally silent. The morning air 3 months later didn't smell like lilies or expensive musk. It smelled like cedar mulch and rain-drenched earth. I sat on the back tailgate of my truck, watching the movers carry the last of the mahogany furniture out of the house. The power couple fortress was empty. The floor-to-ceiling windows that once reflected a curated perfection now looked like hollow eyes, staring out at a landscape I was no longer interested in manicuring. It's strange how quickly a home turns back into a house when you stop breathing life into the lies that hold the walls up. I pulled a thick envelope from my pocket, the paper crisp and official, the final divorce decree. It sat on the metal tailgate next to a stack of legal correspondence from the district attorney's office. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal. It was the only thing in my life that wasn't a blueprint or a sketch. It was a period at the end of a very long, very dark sentence. I opened the top letter, the words as cold and clinical as the handcuffs that had ended the gala. The letter read, State versus Marcus Thorne and Chloe Vance. Charges: financial fraud, identity theft, and endangerment through controlled substance tampering. Discovery phase is complete. Based on the digital evidence provided from the secondary device and the forensic accounting reports from Sundance Holdings, a plea deal has been rejected. Trial set for the 14th. I remembered the last time I saw them. 2 weeks ago, in a sterile, fluorescent-lit courtroom for a preliminary hearing. Marcus looked smaller. Without the Italian wool suits and the $500 haircuts, he was just a man with a receding hairline and a nervous twitch in his left eye. He tried to catch my gaze, to project that old, architectural charm one last time. He leaned over the table and whispered, Elena, please, it was the debt. I did it for us. I was just trying to secure our future. You have to tell them you weren't yourself that night. And Chloe, my sister, she sat at the defense table, her hair unwashed, wearing a cheap blazer she must have borrowed from her court-appointed lawyer. She didn't look like a wild child anymore. She looked like a consequence. She'd sent me a letter from the county jail. 3 pages of tear-stained rambling about how she was seduced by Marcus's lifestyle, how she was a victim too. The letter had said, he manipulated me. He told me you were going to leave me nothing in the will. He said you hated me. Please, I'm your sister. We're an unbreakable unit, remember? Don't let me go to prison for a mistake. I burned that letter in the kitchen sink. An unbreakable unit. It's funny how people only invoke the bond of blood when they're bleeding. I haven't spoken to her since the gala, and I never will again. Some roots are so diseased they have to be ripped out by the base, or they'll rot the entire forest. Sarah pulled her car into the driveway, the gravel crunching under her tires. She hopped out, carrying 2 cardboard cups of coffee, and a look of fierce, unadulterated triumph. She handed me a cup and leaned against the truck. She said, The final audit came in this morning, Al. We recovered 60% of the Sundance funds. The rest is gone, spent on Chloe's gambling debts and Marcus's offshore consultancy fees, but the house sale will more than cover the difference. You're coming out of this clean. Financially, at least. I took a sip of the coffee, the heat grounding me. I said, I don't care about the money, Sarah. I care about the silence. Do you know how quiet it is in my new place? No muffled vibrations in the closet. No whispering on the porch. Just the sound of the wind. I forgot what that sounded like. You've changed, Sarah said, her eyes scanning my face. You don't look like you're waiting for a building to fall anymore. I stopped living in the ruins. I replied. I realized I spent 10 years trying to landscape a graveyard. Now I'm just planting what I want to see grow. I've moved to a small cottage on the coast, 3 hours away from the heights. It's a tiny place, shingle-sided, salt-crusted, and entirely mine. There is no guest house. There are no hidden cameras. I spent the last month stripping the wallpaper and sanding the floors until my fingers bled, a physical exorcism of the life Marcus had built for me. My new studio is a sun-drenched room overlooking the Atlantic. I've started a new firm, not for luxury estates or power couple fortresses, but for restorative design. I work with women who have lost their homes to fire, divorce, or fraud. I help them rebuild spaces that are focused on safety and transparency. My first client is a woman who spent 20 years in a marriage very similar to mine. When we sat down to look at her blueprints, she looked at the bedroom closet and started to cry. I took her hand and told her, "We're going to put the lights on a motion sensor. There will be no dark corners in this house. I promise." I picked up my phone, my new encrypted phone, and saw a notification. A news alert from the local paper. Former architect Marcus Thorne and accomplice Chloe Vance found guilty on all counts. Sentencing to follow. I didn't click on the article. I didn't need to read the details. I lived the details. I felt a brief, flickering moment of pity for the people they used to be, but it vanished as quickly as a shadow when the sun hits it. I looked back at the big house one last time. The sold sign was being hammered into the lawn by a man in a neon vest. A young couple was standing by the gate, holding hands, looking up at the balcony with stars in their eyes. They think they're buying a dream. I hope for their sake it stays that way. I climbed into the cab of my truck and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a steady, honest vibration. I reached into the glove box and pulled out the old burner phone, the one I'd kept as a final trophy. I drove down to the pier, the one that overlooks the deep, churning water of the bay. I stood at the edge of the wood planks, the salt spray misting my face. I looked at the small, plastic device in my hand. The sun, the light that was supposed to burn me out. I realize now that the only way to deal with a shadow is to move into the light yourself. I threw the phone as hard as I could. I watched it arc through the gray sky, a tiny, insignificant speck, before it vanished into the white foam of the waves. It didn't make a sound. The ocean swallowed it whole, along with the secrets, the scopolamine, and the sister who wasn't a sister at all. I walked back to my truck, my steplight. For the first time in a decade, my mind was my own. My heartbeat was my own. I pulled out of the driveway, the heights receding in my rearview mirror until they were nothing but a blur of expensive trees and hollow glass. I have a meeting at 2 p.m. with a contractor for a community garden project. It's going to be full of wildflowers, open paths, and clear sight lines. It's going to be a place where nothing can be hidden and everything has room to breathe. My phone buzzed on the seat next to me. A text from Sarah. "New life begins now. You ready?" I didn't type back a long, complicated explanation. I didn't need to. I just sent one word. Ready. I rolled down the windows, letting the cold, sea-salted air fill the cab. I wasn't an architect of stories anymore. I was just Elena. And as the sun finally broke through the clouds, hitting the road ahead of me with a blinding, honest brilliance, I realized I wasn't just liberated. I was finally, truly home.